Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday night edition of Mrs. R Relevant, the Daily Draft Podcast. We have Jacob in his orange room, and we have Bill in his orange room. And true story, at one point when I first met Jacob and Bill, I thought they were podcasting from the same room and that they were roommates and they didn't even know each other.
Yeah.
So,
I remember you asking me that on one of the first pods. It's like, so you and Bill do a podcast together? Is it like and I was like, actually, I just met Bill 2 weeks ago.
Right. You just met him 2 weeks ago. He's not facing right across from me in the same orange wall. No, not at all.
Well, and now I can see it's a different color orange. But literally, this is the first time that I think I've podcasted with both of you where you're in your orange room because Jacob's not in a hotel room anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
You want to know what's funny? You say that you mentioned like the hotel room. I showed this on here, but my Pikachu came back. He got an 8.5. He came back from grading.
Ooh.
I got an 8.5. But you guys, I podcasted with you from in a hotel room the day I got this card. That night. Yeah.
Very nice.
So Jacob, how are things?
It's settling into a new job, a new role. So things are, kind of some changing shifts. There's a chance I'll be on floating shift, moving around, changing from week to week till we can nail something down. But like I'm home again every night. So things are great.
Yeah.
Bill, it is good to see you. We've got a busy week next week.
Yeah, it is. It is good to see you. It's good to be here. We've got obviously the big 32 GM 7-round mock draft coming up next week. We're 22 days from the NFL draft. We're kicking off, if you're crazy like me, already kicking off for the 2026 class and grinding tape for that as well, getting ready for summer scouting. I don't sleep at this point. I have 4 TVs in the lab and a laptop screen next to it, and constantly grinding tape just to bring you the top tier draft content and some housekeeping, of course, before we dive into this. Make sure, folks, if you are watching on YouTube, that you hit that like button, that you hit that subscribe, turn on the notification bell, drop a comment. That's a big thing. If you don't like what we're saying, tell us. If you love what we're saying, tell us. If you want to tell a friend, tag them too.
Tag your enemy while you're at it.
Exactly. Tag them too. Bring them all in. Let's have a giant war room in the comments. Make sure, obviously, that you follow our lovely moderator over on X. That's Jim at NFL Draft Fanatic. No I in Fanatic. You can also follow Jacob over at Roachism13 on X as well as he does a lot of written work for the OBR, where it's mostly Browns content, but there is some draft content tuned into it as well. You can also follow me on X at Spark Scouting, as well as find all of my written work over at the Right Way Sports Network. That's TWSN.net. I think that's about everything. Tonight's topic is going to be, obviously, the Browns team needs. So what do you say we dive in?
Definitely. So is is quarterback the number one need? Like, is it like that transparent, Jacob?
Well, considering that your owner came out this week and officially for the first time they admitted that the Deshaun Watson trade was a swing and a miss. I mean, just straight up. I think that was his exact words. We took a massive swing and we missed, and the contract, all of that. It was big swing and a miss. So when you then subtract Deshaun Watson from that equation because of what the owner said, Kenny Pickett is the only quarterback on the roster. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. I'm actually kind of slightly intrigued by Kenny Pickett being the starter week 1. But they are definitely not going to go into it with only Kenny Pickett. And that is, in every sense of the word, need another quarterback.
Yes, and I'm glad you hit on the Haslam quotes about the swing and the miss, because that pretty much seals the fate of Deshaun Watson. Folks said, he'll be on the PUP, he'll come back later in the season. I don't see any player returning when your owner makes that sort of comment, and then also says you can blame me and my wife for bringing him aboard. That's the spicy part about it. But yeah, you're right. You take him out of the equation, the only quarterback you have is Kenny Pickett. I still expect them to probably sign a veteran post-draft. The hot names that pop up, obviously, guys like Carson Wentz, Teddy Bridgewater, the Kirk Cousins drama trade, the fact that he was at Chipotle in Ohio,
and Mission Barbecue.
And can we talk about his Chipotle order for a second? Because
because it was kind of bullshit.
Yeah, because who orders a salad with double chicken? You don't do that. You order a salad with chicken, and then once they've scooped it and they do the second scoop, say, "Oh yeah, I'd like double chicken." So you get the maximum amount of scoops.
So that you get a lot of chicken.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a little tidbit. See, here at the Draft Professor, not only do we give you draft content, we give you Chipotle order content.
This is real that Kirk Cousins was in Cleveland?
Yes. So
yes.
What you need to understand, Jim, we are completely unhinged as a franchise fan base. Mm-hmm. And so as a fan base, I was just talking to a guy about tracking Jimmy Haslam's private plane because it's in the area to where they could be working out Ashton Genty in a private workout. So, and it's on its way to Eugene, Oregon. So there's a lot. Josh Connerly is there, maybe, perhaps. That's a place.
Dylan Gabriel.
Gabriel.
I tracked the Pagula jet. That's not unusual.
Okay. But on Sunday, it was Sunday, right, Bill? Yes, it was Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday.
Sunday, I'm sitting here, and I get a message because someone has posted a picture of Kirk Cousins in Lakewood, which is a suburb of Cleveland, in the Chipotle. It was like 40 degrees, so he wasn't there for the weather. And then he was also spotted, and a picture was posted with him at a Mission Barbecue, which is a few 15 miles away. And everybody's like, he's not in Cleveland. This is not Lakewood. It got confirmed by multiple people, including Ian Rappaport, that we had figured it out. Us Browns fans were snapping pictures. We were comparing the pictures of that Chipotle when it opened to verify that it was the right Chipotle. We were doing side by side on the internet.
Fully enhancing on the sneeze guards to determine that it was the current monthly deal. We are completely unhinged.
We saw the date.
Everything. And it gets even weirder. You have people that went full on down the rabbit hole. Hey, there's a doctor's office nearby that also works
the Browns team doctor.
Exactly. That's the Browns team doctor. We have lost all sense of normalcy in the Cleveland Browns fan base. That's why we are the way we are.
Well, just so you know, I think that happens with every fan base. So, if DeAndre Hopkins gets cut or whatever, we just saw DeAndre Hopkins at Duff's, right? Or we saw him at Wegmans.
But we were right; he was actually there.
Yeah. So in this case, you were right. With Bills fans, we just become unhinged because like we'll say things like at the end of the season, like Joe Brady doesn't return his shopping cart. Like you don't want to hire him. He doesn't return his shopping cart right when he shops at Wegmans, or like
That's
you know
fair.
he doesn't like fold his napkins correctly or whatever. Right? We'll create those threads so people think that they shouldn't hire him as a coach. So every fan base becomes unhinged. It's part of like so. One of the reasons that I like podcasting better than hopping on Twitter and talking with Randall on Twitter, for example, about Bills, is that it's just this is way more normal to just talk with people. So even though like I'm let's say less invested in the Browns, I am still like let's say there's a part of me that says I will measure like if you guys say team needs and the Browns have 4 picks in the top 100, right?
Yes. Top 104, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, do you not have your normal 3rd round pick?
No, they have a pair of 3rd round picks, and then they have pick 104. I'm sorry, they have 5 picks in the top 104.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
So one of the things that Dean Kindig tracks is he has a team needs matrix. And then what he tries to do is say, does a team in the first 3 rounds draft 3 of the top 4 needs based upon that? And he's usually like at 80% on the accuracy of that. So as I'm listening to the Browns team needs, I'm going to compare it to Dean's matrix. And that's something that I can kind of keep score on in my head. But Bill, what do you have as, let's say, the top 2 needs for the Browns?
So the top 2 needs for the Browns, obviously Jacob hit on the first one. It's quarterback, and it has to be Kenny Pickett as your only quarterback is a recipe for disaster to not give him any sort of competition. The second one for me is running back because you have Jerome Ford as a running back, and he's a great complementary piece, but he is not a lead back type of guy. He's a running back by committee. We don't know what's going to happen with Nick Chubb. He's still a free agent. Is he negotiating a deal? Does he have interest from other teams?
Is anyone else under contract?
To my knowledge, that is it. Pierre Strong, I believe, is on a veteran minimum small end deal, but that's it.
That's what I
running
thought.
back. Yeah, the running back room is about as thin as the quarterback room. So those are probably the 2 biggest ones, which doesn't surprise me considering you look at the last time this Browns team drafted any quarterback was 2023 when they took Dorian Thompson-Robinson in the 5th round. And then as far as running back drafted, it was Jerome Ford in the 5th round in 2022. So they haven't spent any high level, quote unquote, capital. The highest capital they've spent offensively would be Cedric Tillman in the 3rd round in the last 5 years.
And the Browns have like twice as many picks this year as you've probably had the last 2 years combined, right?
Probably.
Like Deshaun Watson, you traded away a lot of draft capital. And this is the first year that you have all of your own capital plus what you've acquired for the Amari Cooper trades and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, we're up to 10 picks in this one.
Yeah, up to 10. At one point, they were projected to get 12, and then, of course, they traded the 5th round pick for Kenny Pickett, and then they just lost one of the comp picks because something with Jordan Elliott's situation, as was my understanding. Mm-hmm. So they're at 10, and you've got half of those picks come in the top 104, including 2 and 33. So, like, you go from this bare cupboard to, of course they have a gap from 104 to 179, which it's just a brutal stretch on day 3 while you're just kind of like just
twiddling your thumbs. Yeah,
because I'll be streaming all day on day 3. I'll be on the OBR's live stream for the entirety of day 3, and they're going to hit you right there in the nards. But like, yeah, man, it's they've got a ton of capital this year.
And I would almost not be shocked if we see them trade out of that 104 spot just to drop into the 120-ish range and then try to get something around 140, 150.
140. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, 140, 150, yeah.
Just to kind of spread it out.
Yep. Is it my turn? I can answer the same question then.
Yeah, I say, what's
so
your?
do you think
what's your-
running back is the number 2 need, Jacob?
I'm comfortable with that. Yeah. I'm comfortable with saying I'm comfortable with it saying number 2. Just for all the reasons, and I did check just to verify. Yeah, it's literally Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong under contract. Like it's literally in that spot, and this is like that time where it's like, hey, why don't you take 2? Go ahead and take 2 and get me a veteran and fill out that room, right? Jerome Ford, bring back, even if it's bringing back Nick. I do. I hope they bring back Nick Chubb. But like you bring back Nick Chubb and you get let's say Henderson and Taj Brooks.
Ooh.
like just
Yeah. And I would
guy and a power guy.
Exactly. And I agree with you. I would agree Taj Brooks, and then I'd also throw like a Jaden Blue from Texas, just a burner. Give me, Jaden Blue, who's a burner and a pass catcher, or Jaden Blue, who's a burner, and LaQuint Allen, a pass catcher. You don't need to have a running back do it all if you can take 2 that can do it just as well.
And then I would like to pivot and say tight end.
Yes.
And I know people are going to want to say wide receiver because wide receiver is up there. I put tight end a little bit higher because what I can say about wide receiver is I think Jerry Jeudy he was a 1,200-yard receiver.
Mm-hmm.
You watched it. And that was with Deshaun Watson through 7 games. Through 7 games, Jerry Jeudy had like 300 receiving yards. Through 7 games. He ended up with 1,200 yards. At one point, he was like 3rd in the league in receiving. I think he finished 6th. And a lot of that had to do with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. If Jameis Winston was Jerry Jeudy's quarterback for 17 games, he could have pushed 1,800 yards. Like, I don't think that's why I was so mad when Russell Wilson signed in New York, because Jameis Winston was about to give Malik Neighbors was going to set the record. He's going to get like 2,500 yards. Like, it was going to be something absurd from Jameis. But at least behind him, Cedric Tillman showed me enough to where I'm like, hey, I like him as a number 3 wide receiver. I like him as an outside guy. I like him where he's at. When you look at tight end, it's David Njoku, full stop. I like Blake Whiteheart, who's on the roster. The other 2 guys are Brendan Bates and Trey McKitty. Okay. Those are your tight ends on the roster. So those are all future contracts. I think they're all futures contracts, if I'm completely
I believe the Whiteheart is a futures contract. It is Njoku, and that's it. And the problem is with Stefanski reverting to his old system, with Tommy Rees coming in as the new offensive coordinator, they're going to go back to a lot of 12 personnel, and you need at least 2, if not 3 tight ends. So as much as wide receiver is a need, I think tight end's an even bigger one. I'm going to agree with you. I think it's right there. It's a conglomerate: running back, tight end. You could convince me of wide receiver as well, but I think you're spot on there.
So I do find it interesting that you guys, if I just heard you right, quarterback, running back, tight end, you didn't list offensive tackle.
So that would be because there's enough at offensive tackle for me. There's enough at offensive tackle that is intriguing to the point where I'm confident in who's going to start. As of today, Cornelius Lucas is going to start at left tackle. I can live with that. He was significantly better than anybody who took left tackle snaps for the Cleveland Browns in 2023. I'm sorry, in 2024. Probably in 2023 too, if we're being completely honest.
It was Jedrick Wills at that point. You could say it was 2023 too. So
Christian, that's when Jerron Christian made a bunch of starts over there at left tackle that year. But I meant in this past year in 2024, and Jack Conklin was great, man. He was healthy. He didn't start the season, but once he got out on the field and was 100%, he was great. DeJuan Jones has at least been a serviceable pass protector as their kind of swing tackle right now. Then after that, yes, I've got questions. After that. But I do think that the 2 starters are good. I only feel good about one tight end and one wide receiver, or and two wide receivers. Whereas I feel good about my starting tackles, and I kind of am intrigued enough by the skill set of DeJuan Jones to where tackle's probably next. It's up there. I want that. I keep wanting Josh Connerly at 33 if I can get him, but that's at least that's how I feel about the tackle position.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think they take one, but if they take one, it's either going to be at 33, like you said, or we're not going to see it until day 3. And a lot of it hinges on, is DeJuan Jones going to be healthy? Is Jack Conklin going to be able to stay healthy? Cornelius Lucas is not a spring chicken. He's 34 years old, so you've got to get something in place behind him. But I think when you look at it, quarterback, you have one, and even then, do you really trust him? Running back, you have one. Do you really trust him? Wide receiver, you have one you trust, and one you kind of trust, could be intrigued by. Tight end, you have one, and that's about it. So ultimately, if you wrote on a piece of paper offense only no matter what and handed it to Andrew Berry, that could be the team's needs, and no one would blink an eye just because of how, and this is putting it politely, folks, how putrid this offense was last year, right? Dead last in scoring by at least 1.5 points, 15 points a game. And that's where part of it obviously is your quarterback issue. Part of it is your scheme. Part of it is you had revolving doors at both tackles. You didn't have skill positions. So both of those, all of that put together is going to cause some major issues to be able to move the ball at will and score. In addition to that, it's an offensive league. We've seen teams, Philadelphia, Jim, you in Buffalo know this, Kansas City, you've got to be able to move the ball and score to win games. Defense can win a championship, but not when your offense is on life support. Because if you can only score 15 points a game, it means you need your defense to pitch pretty much a shutout for 60 minutes every week. And even the best defenses aren't going to do that. But there are some defensive needs. Don't get me wrong. The biggest one is probably safety next to Grant Delpit. Thornhill's gone. There isn't really much behind him right now. It's Ronnie Hickman, depending on how you feel about him. And then after that, it's Trey Dean. They would need a free safety, or you could move Delpit to free safety and get a strong safety. You just need a second body back there. And then obviously another sneaky need is linebacker, depending on the health of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah with the neck injury. All accounts is he's on schedule, but we don't know what that schedule is going to be. Will we see him in 2025? We don't know
anything about that schedule. They say he's on a schedule, but we know nothing about it.
Right. We know nothing about it. So that defense would be with 4 6th-round selections. I would say at least 3 of those would be defense.
So this is an interesting, as I'm listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Howie Roseman theory of team building, right?
Mm-hmm.
You stick to the premium positions early: quarterback, defensive line, offensive tackle, corner, wide receiver. Right? But those weren't the positions that you listed, right? Because you had tight end and running back as needs 2 and 3. And obviously this draft is really good at both of those positions, right? Theoretically, if you waited to round 6 for running back and tight end, there's going to be something on the board to help fill out the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you, let's say, stack, okay, the draft is strong, defensive line, it may not be the biggest need. Where do you stack? I'd rather make sure that I'm really good at the premium positions like defensive tackle or offensive. Well, and granted, offensive tackle is not the strength of the draft class, but even corner early. Do you look at, when you draft, you should say, let's take good players and then fill out the needs of the roster in round 6, versus do you draft the positions close to the order that you need them, meaning running back and tight end before corner?
So this is my general philosophy, and I think I feel like I have a decent feel for Andrew Barry's drafting philosophies after 5 seasons. Although last year they kind of bent some of the things they had been doing for the previous 4, and we were about to be like, yes, we have a 5-year sample size, and we were so excited about it, and then it kind of like turned into this 4-year sample size and 1 outlier year. We're just kind of like, okay, I don't know what the heck you're doing here to us all of a sudden. But I try to do my best to marry the two concepts. Marry the two concepts in any way I can. So if you're talking quarterback, running back, tight end, offensive tackle, corner may be need number 5. But if I'm at the 33rd pick and a guy that I have 10th on my big board is there at corner, like it's like I'm not doing like if I'm sitting there and I'm saying, okay, I have a top 10 prospect on my big board on the table at this position, but at these other positions that maybe are bigger needs, I have 45 and 20 or whatever. And it's in the values, right? Like you're like, yeah, I'm at 33 and this is my 28th prospect, but I could get a guy that I think is a top 10 blue chipper, like, you know, kind of elite prospect. Because if you got somebody in your top 10, you really like their the direction you think their career is going to go. So I'm just trying to mirror that, especially in the early rounds. And then I like to kick into what you say. I get to the 6th round, I got 4 of these puppies. like I got 4 of these puppies. Oh, I didn't take a D tackle or a tight end. I'm going to do that. I'm going to when I come up, I'm going to take the best available at the positions of need that are remaining that I didn't already address.
Okay. Couple of other Cleveland draft questions. And again, I have a Bills slant, but how many rookies made Cleveland last year?
It was all of them, wasn't it?
Coming out of camp. How many was all?
I'll get
that.
Is it 10?
It was.
I think it was 7.
6. It was 6 or 7. Yeah,
it was 6.
And all 6 made the roster in some form or fashion. When you look at it, Michael Hall, Zach Zinter, Jamari Thrash were on the roster. Nathaniel Watson was practice squad roster back and forth for a couple of games. And then Miles Harden and Jawan Briggs were late call-ups when there was nothing left.
Well, Miles Harden was on IR.
Yeah, you're right.
Miles Harden spent most of the year on IR. But yes, in some they were either practice squads, and all of them played. Miles Harden only played 4 games. Jawan Briggs played 6. Those are their 2 7th-round picks. Watson played 14 games. Thrash played 9. Zinter was active in all 17. And Michael Hall played 8. So, yeah.
So, do you guys count, okay, we lost this many players off the 53, and we've only signed these couple free agents. So, the 53, looking from last year to this year, has 10 openings. Do you guys count it like that, or you don't look at it that way?
I haven't recently, but
yeah, I look at it that way, but Andrew Barry doesn't. So the few things that you have to know about Andrew Barry when you're drafting, the first thing is he is, like Jacob said, he's all about value, but there are also some quote unquote guardrails that he has, and to simplify them, he skews towards younger prospects with high RAS, relative athletic scores. So there's typical RAS thresholds for every position. It's different. Most of the time, the younger, the higher the RAS, it's going to be on Andrew Barry's radar. The second part, like Jacob had alluded to as well, is he's going to get the best value possible, but he's also forward thinking. Like you look at last year's draft when he took Zach Zinter in the 3rd round to play guard, he was thinking a year to 2 years ahead because Joel Bitonio's on his last season. Wyatt Teller's up there in years. Same thing for Jamari Thrash. Elijah Moore is a free agent this year. So he's thinking ahead in terms of what he's going to go for. So those 2 things are the big things. So he'll note that, yeah, I've got 10 openings on the roster, and I expect all 10 to make the roster. And you look at the 23 class too, Cedric Tillman, DeJuan Jones, Isaiah McGuire, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Cameron Mitchell, Luke Weipler. The only real washout of that class was Siaki Ika, and that was their 3rd round selection, 98th overall.
And then they
That
traded.
was the defensive tackle that was like vastly overrated. Like he was just a big guy, but didn't move, right?
Yeah, big guy, run defender, but couldn't really move in any way.
Couldn't really
shape,
defend the run either. That was the weird part.
Yeah.
That was the one thing he was supposed to do, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So the reason that I ask that, right? So the Browns have 10 draft picks. Do you expect all 10 draft picks to make the team?
I mean, right now,
If we're talking just the 53,
Correct.
no. But if you're including practice squad, yes.
So it's interesting. Like Buffalo, if a draft pick makes the practice squad, they usually get plucked off of it.
Mm-hmm.
So Brandon Beane will only draft players that he knows he can make the 53. If they can't make the 53, he's trading the pick. So like by the time Buffalo gets to like round 6, last year that player was an international pathway. So he gained a practice squad spot because the pathway gives you a 17th practice squad spot.
right. Yep.
That was why he did it. He didn't need to worry, and that player's protected. Like I don't believe Cleveland can grab the international pathway off of Buffalo's practice squad.
Yeah, because I think they have their own.
Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting, right? Just listening to like what goes on with another team, right? So here would be an example, like again, taking the situation is I hear it, right? Like, okay, can two rookie edges make Buffalo's roster? Well, if they can't, we're only going to draft one, and you're one and done. There's certain positions in the draft. Buffalo's one wide receiver and done. If we draft 2, one of them's going to have to get cut. Right? Like I want Buffalo to draft a running back, but there is no room for a running back to make the roster unless they play special teams because Buffalo has 3 running backs under contract. But ironically, James Cook put his house for sale in Buffalo today. That was you guys were talking about Chipotle with Kirk Cousins, and Buffalo it was James Cook put his house on sale. So different fan bases become unhinged for very different reasons.
Every year there's a free agent or someone that goes on the trade block, and the first thing, Jacob, what comes out? Hey, I saw so and so looking for a house in Strongsville.
Yep.
Yeah, it's strong. It's always strong. So they're like, yep, somebody's driving around Strongsville right now looking for a house.
Yeah,
and you're just like, shut the fuck up.
Just stop it. But I think if you're looking at the draft class, if you look at all the Browns picks, I would say at least up until about pick 200. So that would leave 216 and 255. So those 2 probably go to the practice squad, but the remainder of them, so 233, 67, 94, 104, 179, 192, and 200 should all make the roster in some form or fashion. Depending on the pick, if it's a position that's deep, like, for example, edge, even though some people think we have a need at edge rusher, it's actually deeper than you would think when you look at it. You have Myles Garrett, you have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who was a first-round pick for the Buccaneers, Alex Wright, and Isaiah McGuire, who this team drafted both high on, Ogbo Arankwo as well. That right there is a rotation that you can hang your hat on. Yes, you'd probably throw one of those 6th round picks on a flyer on someone just as a developmental piece. But if you were to draft an edge like that, fully expect them to go to the practice squad. But if you're looking at, say, running back, you draft it, there's a high likelihood, unless they are just awful, that they make the roster.
Even if they make us, I could see them taking a second running back at 254, their final pick up there, and that pick making it over like a 6th round edge.
Yep.
And we know too, those throwaway picks, a lot of times the Browns will use those throwaway picks on priority UDFAs.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, just so they can secure the rights to the guy they want. And we also know too that Barry's not averse to moving up and down the board. He's historically moved back before up, but there's nothing saying
They
he's
went
going to
after
make.
JOK.
Yeah, they went after him. But
It's easier to move up in rounds 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
Right. Because like to move up in round 4, it usually just costs you a fifth. Right. Like it's cheap. Whereas if you're moving up in round 1 and you have to give up like 3 picks, right?
Yeah.
It's you have to be able to say, like, would those 3 guys have made the roster? So, like, one of my drafting philosophies is draft your starters, right? If you need a role player, you can find that in free agency, but you try to look, like you said, you look 2 years out. So, like, when I look at a draft, I say, okay, well, Buffalo coming out of the draft needs these 2 positions. But if I were to fast forward to next year, I came up with a list, and the list had like 20 positions on it, based on who's under contract and what's about to expire.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, you get 10 of those this year, and you get 10 of those next year. And that's not the way it's going to work, because we'll sign some free agents and stuff. But I could literally document that Buffalo needs 2 of every position, right? Just because we have contracts expiring at the end of the year next year. So do you draft that position this year so that it's not a hole? Like last year was the first year that Brandon Beane drafted every position. He drafted a receiver, a running back, an offensive lineman, a defensive tackle, an edge, a corner, a safety, a linebacker. He hit literally every position group on the roster except tight end and quarterback. It was the first time he ever did that. This draft, we don't look like we have as many needs because we did that last year.
Right.
But you have to draft like that over and over again to make sure.
Barry loves that. And Andrew Barry loves that. I just went into one side mug and just tell Bill that my Red Ranger helmet is better.
You see it back there in the background. Love to see it. But and I'm glad we brought up trading up, because the one thing that's out there is trading up into the first round
for one of those falling quarterbacks.
For one of a falling quarterback. If you're going to do it, I would not go past, say, 30 to Buffalo, Jim's Buffalo. Because you look at the trade value alone, you're looking at Buffalo at pick 30 is a value of 196. Browns have a value of 180. So in theory, you could send 33, 179, and 192, and that is a fair value to get up into 30.
Yep.
Would Buffalo accept that? Who knows? But that's a fair value. Obviously, then if you go up to, say, pick 20 to get ahead of Pittsburgh, you're now looking at sending 33 and 67 just as a starting kit. So now you're going to say, okay, we're going to go up and get a quarterback, but we could lose out on 2 players at 33 and 67. We could lose out on that running back and that tight end. So that's the balance that Andrew Barry has to weigh is this quarterback that is falling the quarterback to say, okay, I'm going to trade up for Jackson Dart
right
at 20. Is Jackson Dart a better player than we'll say Travion Henderson and Mason Taylor? That's the scale you have to play when you're trading up.
So that same trade that you said, Bill, I realized that was like a 6th and a 7th or 2 6ths that it would cost to move up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the way that if I look at like how Brandon Beane would do that, what Brandon Beane would say is basically is 109 Cleveland's original 4th round pick? No, Cleveland has 104. So 109, I guess, is the Bears pick. So would moving from 33 to 30, would you trade 94 back to 109?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Because that 6th round pick doesn't do any good for Buffalo. It's getting that extra day 2 pick. And when we did the Keon Coleman trade, Most people don't realize this, but Brandon Beane took a 6th round pick and he got it all the way up to round 4 in that deal. So he moved a round 4 up to round 3 and he moved a round 6 up to round 4. Or it may have been he moved a pick that was 6th, almost 7th, all the way up to the top of round 5. So he basically moved a couple of picks up like 65 spots in the order. Like 2 picks moved up 2 full rounds. Right. And that's Brandon Beane doesn't want the extra picks. He wants to take the picks that he have and make them better.
Right. And I think this year, especially if I was the Browns, I'd be willing to make that move because from about pick 20 to about pick 80, it's going to be a lot of similar graded guys. And eventually those guys are going to push further and further back into the class. So you can say, yeah, I'll give you pick 94 for pick 109 because the guy I want at 94, there's a high likelihood he'll still be there at 109, if not a very similar talent, probably the next one right below him.
It's only
in my top
10 spots on the draft. Right. You're right. It's only 10 spots on the draft board. But those 10 spots, like especially for Buffalo, that's a cornerback.
Yeah.
Right. Like in that cornerback, there's going to be a run on corners there. So to get at the front of the run instead of the back. Jacob, I cut you off. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Like I published my final big board, my top 150 today. When you get to when I get to about pick 25-ish. Yeah, so about 24, pick 24, which is really 22. So I got Shamar Stewart at 22 and then Shedeur Sanders and Josh Connerly at 23 and 24. And then after that, it's like just a bunch of dudes all the way up until like 100 where I'm just like, I'm just splitting hairs.
The story you're telling with the grading is a story that we need to tell more. So, for example, Noel Williams, right? 3rd round grade for both of you?
Let me pull it up because I may be about where I'm at. I'm a little lower. I'm an early part of day 4, early part of round 4, end of round 3. So you could convince me that he's round 3.
Okay. But to Jacob's point, let's say he's 110 on your board, Bill. Would it surprise you if he went in the top 64?
Absolutely not.
Right? Look at that range.
Yeah.
Look at that range right there. Because it wouldn't shock me if he drops to round 4, and it wouldn't shock me if he's drafted in round 2. And nearly every player in that tier is going to be graded that way.
Yeah.
Right. To Jacob's point, the grades there are, I don't want to say flat, but the variance is narrow.
It's not. No. And I'm glad Jacob brought that up. So I published my top 100 yesterday over at twsn.net. And from about pick 23, which would be Michael Williams, all the way to pick 100. So 77 players on my board. They are all within the rounds 2 to 3 range. The problem with that is you have 70 players in a 32 pick range.
Yes.
Somebody's going to get pushed out. And whether that's offensive linemen, whether that's linebackers, corners, running backs, we don't know. But I would almost bet from that point, if you push them out into round 3, you're now pushing round 3 talent to round 4, 4 into 5, 5 into 6, 6 into 7.
Yeah.
So you can get, if you're a team like the Browns that has 4 6th-round picks in any other draft, those are dart throws. You hope to make the roster. This year, you could get a top 100. You could get a guy off Jacob's 150 list at pick 200 or even pick 216.
Yeah. Like if I'm looking at it, like would I be I've got Cody Simon, I have him 145. I have no idea where he goes. Like the linebacker from Ohio State. Like, could he be there at 192? He could. He might go 120. Yeah, like just as an example, man, I'm with you.
Yeah. Like I same way, I have a guy, Maxwell Hairston. I have him 73rd on my board. He's getting late round buzz, but I could see him feasibly falling all the way into round 3. There's a lot of high variance players because I've called this draft for some time. I've called it the Baskin Robbins draft. It is a flavor when you are the GM and you get up to the sneeze guard and they ask you, what would you like? It's up to you to make that order. You want a man coverage corner? Okay, here's your list. You want a press corner? Here's your list. You want a zone guy? Here you go. So that's what we're going to see. And that's why I think, and the NFL announced it back in March, they weren't going to invite nearly as many players to the draft this year. They're only inviting 8 to 12 players because there's such a wide variance on the class. They can't sit there and say, yep, these 15 guys are the guys we know that are going to go in round 1. These 20 guys we know are going to be off the board by pick 32. You could have guys with first round grades that aren't viewed highly in the community. 2 of mine, for example, Shedeur Sanders, who's my 15th overall prospect, and Alfred Collins, who's my 19th overall prospect, both have first round grades for me. But some people have Alfred Collins in the 3rd round. Mm-hmm. Some people have Shedeur at pick 33. So that's where you're going to see a lot of teams say, okay, give me as many picks in that 25 to 125 range as possible. So like in Jim's scenario where the Bills would trade back and the Browns would trade up and vice versa. Absolutely. But at the same time, a team like the Browns that has 4 picks in the 6th round can just say, hey, we're just hanging out here. We'll take these 6th round picks because we may end up with 4th round guys at every single one of them.
And just have the perfect depth and youth that can sit there and potentially develop into replacement players for you in a year or 2. That's what you know what I mean? Like that's exactly what you're trying to do in that situation.
Absolutely. But I think ultimately this draft for the Browns especially is going to be a pivotal one if it hasn't already been said, because this is the first draft after having all their picks back from the Deshaun Watson era. And everybody talks about Watson and how the contract was a failure. I'd argue the capital they gave up was worse because cap is cap, money is money, and everything's made up and those points don't matter.
So whose line is it anyway?
Yeah, exactly. What matters is the capital they gave up, 3 first-round picks. You can't get those players back. Now, obviously, Houston didn't do a lot with them. Kenyon Green, who was one of the first-rounders they used, is now in Philadelphia. You hit or miss. Yeah, sirens going off outside my house. What do you know? 1 second.
Tornadoes?
I hope not. Yeah, it puts them in a really interesting. Go ahead, Bill.
I was gonna say, we've got a tornado warning in my house, gentlemen. So, as much as I would love to continue to talk shop, I think we might need to wrap this one up.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. Keep everybody safe. So,
yeah,
this has been a pretty good Browns preview. I've learned a few things. For the 52 podcast with the Draft Professor, for Bill, for Jacob, for myself. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.
See you guys.
See ya. Peace.